for an affordable, accessible, safe, and open internet. I think we can all agree that those values are more important than ever today. And if you're not already a member and would like to support us, you can do so by going to internetsociety.org. I think we can all agree that those values are more important to be partnering with Amazon. And if you're not already a member and would like Angus Reid Institute, you can do so by going to internetsociety.org. The findings of a recent survey by today we are Canadians to be partnering with Amazon. If you're not already a member and would like Angus Reid Institute, before I get into introducing our moderator, just a bit of housekeeping. We do encourage your questions, and if you'd like to ask a question, exit full screen, and to the right you'll find two tabs, information and questions. Click on the questions tab and you can submit your questions there. And now I would like to introduce our moderator for today. We are thrilled to have Heather Bakken, who is the publisher and Vice President of Business Development for iPolitics, Canada's only native digital news source for Canadian politics, policy, and the business of government. Heather is a certified digital communications strategist and former broadcast journalist for the CBC, where she anchored News World International. She is the president of the Canadian Club of Ottawa and vice president of the Canadian Committee for World Press Freedom. And she also sits on the board of the Internet Society Canada chapter. And in 2019, she launched the only debating club in Ottawa. Heather, we are thrilled to have you moderating our discussion today. I will leave it to you.
Thank you very much, Franca. That was a very kind introduction, but I think people have come here today to see everybody else on the panel. It's my pleasure to be moderating today's event for the Internet Society Canada chapter and for the event partners who are Angus Reid Institute and Amazon Web Services, also known as AWS. Especially on a topic today that plays such an important role in the lives of all Canadians, government digital transformation. This morning, the Angus Reid Institute released the findings of a recent survey on Canadians' experiences using government digital platforms and on their awareness and expectations around government digital transformation. The full results are available on the Angus Reid Institute website at angusreid.org, but don't go there yet. We want to have a discussion and frame the discussion from one of our special guests. So we'll discuss the results of the national poll. We've brought together a panel of Canadian policy and technology experts to get their insights. But first, our very special guest, Canada's Minister of Digital Government, the Honourable Joyce Murray, Member of Parliament for Vancouver Quadra, here to provide some opening remarks. Over to you, Minister.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Franca, Heather, Nicole, Shachi, and the other leaders of this event today. Gee, that's a lot of women leaders in tech. I love that. And I'm delighted to be with you to open this panel discussion today. First, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from my home in Vancouver, on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. J'aimerais vous souhaiter la bienvenue à cette importante conversation sur la transformation numérique du gouvernement du Canada. Et je tiens à remercier Amazon Web Services et Internet Society Canada chapter pour avoir organisé cette séance. So thank you for putting this together, and great that Angus Reid did the polling on people's perception of government digital services and what they want to prioritize. So thank you. As Canada's first Minister for Digital Government, or standalone minister, I lead the digital transformation of the Government of Canada. Just a small task. We're making generational investments in IT so we can transform how we serve Canadians, because we want people's interactions with government services to be secure, reliable, and easy to use. And clearly we have work to do, as we could see from the poll. It is time for us to put Canadians first as we modernize or design new services so that it's easier for them, not for us in the government. because we know that's not the way it works right now. Part of our problem is an outdated and complex IT infrastructure that we are incrementally modernizing. So for many years, federal IT systems and processes simply didn't receive the attention or investment they needed. That changed in 2016, but we're still playing catch up. And so I think anyone that's used government services or done transactions will know that far too often you have to jump through hoops dictated by bureaucratic processes to get your benefits or do those transactions. And I mean, you must have experienced some aspect of that, whether it's a government website that's pretty hard to navigate, or sitting on hold with CRA, or trying to get hold of Service Canada. So while you may be aware that some government transactions still require you to fax or mail hard copy paper forms, while of course the private sector has managed to go completely digital. So we are a government still functioning on systems built for and operating in an analog world. And while our entrenched, siloed Westminster parliamentary system provides some necessary checks and balances for government, it has also led to lengthy and complex bureaucratic processes. So my task is not a simple matter of digitizing systems and services. We have to digitalize the government, and this is a very important distinction, because this isn't just an IT challenge, it's a people and process and change management challenge as well. And it does take time to rebuild a super tanker that has to keep sailing as you're doing it. So since becoming minister over a year ago, I've worked with my teams in the Office of the Chief Information Officer of Canada, the Canadian Digital Service, the Digital Transformation Office, and Shared Services Canada to understand, to analyze these issues and create a plan to simplify and innovate by bringing all of the pieces of this ministry together. And my plan breaks into 4 areas of work. One is modernizing the way we replace, build, and manage major IT systems. And these are the systems behind the high volume of transactions and benefits that Canadians count on. 2 is to provide digital services to people when and where they need them with the device of their choice. 3rd is taking a whole of government approach to digital stewardship. And just an example of that is really keeping up to date with the cybersecurity perimeter and protections as we move to cloud services and as we modernize other aspects of IT. And I saw in your polling how important that cybersecurity aspect is to Canadians. I think Canada is doing a pretty good job because we have some centralization of that now, but we always have to work to keep up with what's going on in the outside world with bad actors wanting to get a hold of people's data. So we also, on the retail front, we want to make it as easy for Canadians as possible to renew a passport, file their taxes, or access their benefits. As easy, for example, as buying, a pair of jeans or a shirt online. So what we learned from COVID is that the need for change has become ever more critical over the past year. And I think we saw that in the poll as well. And so many people are counting on digital for their transactions and services in the rest of the world. So, but what we found is in the face of the pandemic, our government teams really stepped up. The digital government teams supported the overnight switch to remote workplaces for public servants. We rolled out new digital collaboration tools like MS Teams to keep people connected, working from home. We supported the departments to quickly and easily get financial benefits into people's bank accounts. And we created digital solutions to help people and businesses navigate the new benefits. We also built COVID Alert, which is Canada's national exposure notification app. So we did show Canadians that governments can respond quickly and effectively. But there are still some things the government could not do for Canadians as well as we would have liked because of older IT systems, processes, and equipment. And so my commitment is to make the new ways we found ourselves working in the norm, not the exception, through systematic digital transformation in the Government of Canada. And it's important also for being competitive in the economy of the future, as well as being the foundation to serving citizens well and earning their trust. So just to wrap up, clearly this will mean change. It will mean government, industry, and academia working more closely together on this great project, which is easy to say and pretty tough to do. It will be an ongoing effort where the destination is forever over the horizon. There's no end point here, but there are some really important milestones that I'm working to articulate and put in place. And fundamentally, it's about Canada becoming a stronger, fairer, and more resilient country, which is well worth the effort. So thank you for this discussion today, and thanks for inviting me to kick it off.
Thank you very much, Minister Murray. We really appreciate your time and for sharing the 4 pillars that you're working on to provide the framework for today's discussion. Before I introduce today's panelists, I would also like to acknowledge that while we're on a virtual platform today, we would like to respect and acknowledge the rights of the Indigenous peoples to the land each one of us is on from wherever we're broadcasting from. For Parliament, it is the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin. Anishinaabe are the original inhabitants of the territory where the Parliament buildings overlook the Ottawa River, which is just downstream from one of the most sacred places for Indigenous people, Miigwech. And now to our panelists. We have 4 panelists joining us today. Will weigh in with their expertise on digital transformation. Greg Fergus is Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Digital Government, and he joins us from his Quebec riding of Hull-Aylmer. Shachi Curl is the President of the Angus Reid Institute, joining us from Vancouver. Nicole Foster is the Director of AWS Global Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning. I think the shorthand for that would be AI and ML, but I wanted to make sure everybody knew where we're coming from. And she's also the Director of Canada's Public Policy for AWS. She joined us from Toronto. Dave Telka is the Managing Director of Accenture Canada Public Service Strategy and Consulting. He joins us from Ottawa. There will be an audience Q&A, so as Franca mentioned after, so please submit your questions at any time during the discussion and we'll get to as many as we can. But let's get to it right now. Shachi, I'd like you to kick things off, if you can, with an overview of the survey results.
Absolutely. And hello, good day, everyone. Of course, being from Vancouver, it's my inclination to say good morning, but recognizing we're a vast country with a vast number of time zones, good day. What I would like to do is to just chat with you about the main findings of this report, and they really are highlights. We will not get to everything in there. We will not have time today to do that, but all of the data, the questionnaire, the detailed data tables, it's all accessible at angusreid.org. And I would invite you after this to dig in and have a look into the results yourselves. A little bit about the Institute. We are a nonpartisan, not-for-profit, public opinion polling foundation. And we were founded in 2014 really with the intention and the mission to fill a gap in what had become really a dearth of publicly available, freely available, good quality public opinion polling that wasn't paid for by somebody, that wasn't trying to drive to a particular result or do advocacy. And indeed, we don't do advocacy at the Institute. So when we worked with our partners on this survey at Amazon and the Internet Society Canada chapter, I did say to my good colleagues, look, we don't know what we're going to get in these data, and you might not like the findings, but we have to put them out anyway, because that is what we do. So it's always a bit of a journey into the unknown. So follow me along into this journey that is unknown. The first thing that we looked at in this survey was really the experiences of Canadians online, particularly during the pandemic, but in general. What are they doing online? Well, they're living their lives more and more online. And then we got more into their attitudes towards rating government services online and what they are telling us and telling you about digitization. So the first thing we really found is no big surprise. Canadians are really doubling down on the amount of time they're spending online as they ride out the pandemic from home. So hours and hours being spent, the vast majority really spending more than 2 hours a day. That could be working, that could be communicating, that could be FaceTiming with family, and of course, there is streaming. But we asked that the vast majority have interacted or used or currently are in possession of an online government services account. That is quite a remarkable number, that 78%. Now, in terms of what they're using, the vast majority are using government services online to file their taxes. So it's a MyCRA account. It's also likely to be another one of the main Service Canada accounts associated to really boil it down with getting money. So it's either your pension, EI, CERB, another emergency benefit measure. These are all being accessed online, and indeed some of them are only available online. Now, in terms of rating these government services online, we asked Canadians about a variety of services because, again, the collective we can get very deep into, well, what about federal services? What about provincial services? What about remittance-related services? For the most part, people, the way they're wired, they don't think about it that way. They just think about when I need to interact with my government, how easy or difficult is it for me to navigate the app or the website that I'm using? And you actually see, for the most part, both across federal services offered and provincial ones, things like renewing your driver's license or other provincial interactions, that the ratings are reasonably high. So that is good news. Give yourselves a pat on the back on that front, federal government, because as much as the trope or the meme or the narrative is often around, oh, you know, the bureaucracy never works, the websites are clunky, for the most part, Canadians are reporting that they are having either good or excellent interactions with these services online. Now, there may be an element here of grading on a curve. And what I mean by that is we then ask Canadians to rate these services in relation to other large organizations. So the minister referred to buying a pair of jeans. In a pre-pandemic environment, it might have been booking a flight or booking movie tickets or indeed buying a pair of jeans or ordering a pizza or doing any number of things that we now do in an online and digital environment. On that front, the numbers, as you can see, are not quite as complementary in terms of federal government services that are accessible and offered online relative to other large organizations. And so we said large organizations because we really wanted to be able to put that comparison. The government is a hydra-headed beast. There's a lot of things going on in the same way there would be for a major airline, a major retailer, or even a major charity that solicits and accepts donations online. So it was really, can you give us a sense of what you think the federal government is doing and how well it's performing relative to a lot of these other organizations? Is it clunky? Is it smooth? And you do have, as you can see on the screen, a significant segment of Canadians saying, you know what, not quite as good as other major organizations online. Now, in terms of the impacts of improving those services, again, you do see, that there is a significant amount of buy-in, of appetite to see these services in a way that could be improved. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people are alive to or have heard of this. So the fact that we have a significant number of people on this meeting today engaged in this issue does not mean that Canadians are rolling out of bed in the morning saying, yeah, I'm really thinking about the improvement of digitization in my federal services. It is the same as it is for everyone. Have I fed the kids? Have I walked the dog? What do I have to deal with at work today? These are the main things. Digitization, not so much at the top of the list. And really, you do have a very significant number of Canadians either saying they've never heard of this or they've heard of it, but they don't know a lot about it. And I can tell you something, having been in this world of asking Canadians questions for the better part of a decade now, a lot of the times they'll say they've heard of something, but they haven't really. So I would suspect those % of Canadians, they are agreeing with the statement that they don't really care how they access government services. If it's online, great, but if there's another way to do it, that's fine for me too. So really important to conflate that this isn't necessarily for a significant number of Canadians an either or equation, it's a both and. And for many, they still like talking to somebody on the phone, even if they have to wait on hold. They still like going into a Service Canada place. And so there is a bring along factor for a significant minority of Canadians on this front that I would invite you to be mindful of. Moving along, we then really put the questions to Canadians around, well, what should we do? What do we do about all of this? You have really a sense among Canadians that there is a desire to get going on improving digitization. And indeed, a lot of that is driven by the fact that the vast majority of Canadians do not really think the country is leading on this front relative to other nations. And indeed, among Canadians who have a higher level of awareness on this front, they are even more inclined to say that Canada is lagging behind than the general population. So we then ask Canadians, what do you think about the priorities of this, recognizing that everything is a trade-off? When you ask Canadians in a vacuum, should this be a priority? Yeah, of course it should be a priority. When does ever anybody say that something isn't important or urgent? But of course, it always has to be measured within the framework of better health access, better shoring up emergency measures for the next time we're all dealing with a once in a generation or a once in a multi-generation event, getting the economy back online. All of that to say, you do see relatively few Canadians indicating that it is either a low or a very low priority to either expand digital offerings or to improve what else is out there. Now, what are they really keying in on? Cybersecurity. Indeed, the vast majority say that this is an area that they really want Canadians and their government to give a high level of priority to. And important to remember that when we're talking about cybersecurity, that's different from privacy. It's not so much about how much personal information is available online, but the prevention of things like hacking or the theft of sensitive data. And again, on that front, I do see that Canadians strongly agree, very few of them disagree, that this is something that poses a huge risk to the country. So how do we get better around it? Who is best to protect against these types of threats? For the most part, action to things like the SolarWinds hack, which was detected not by government, but by a private sector firm. And also within the framework of the last 4 years, hearing about almost every day hacks on governments, whether they're Canadian or American or others. They know that people or bad actors are out there. They're just not entirely sure how well the Canadian government, or indeed any level of government, is ready to deal with that. So who should they work with? Again, if they are indicating that there is a higher level of trust or perception of ability in the private sector to get the job done, then indeed they are also more likely to say that government should be working with the private sector to achieve that and to get there. I'm noting time. I have gone as quickly as I can. We will leave it there and indeed open it up to questions. And again, really important, so much more at angusreid.org.
Thank you very much, Shachi. I'm going to turn to our government representative. And Greg, just to ask you, are any of these findings surprising to you in any way?
Yeah, I think there are probably two things which are surprising to me in seeing these results. I think that let's lead off with the last one on cybersecurity. It's really interesting to see that according to Canadians, that the private sector is better positioned to deal with this. When comparatively speaking, although governments are a big bright object and target for hackers, I think comparatively speaking, there have been more breaches of cybersecurity that have gone on in the private sector. Using the same example that Shachi was just using in terms of SolarWinds, you have to remember SolarWinds is a private organization, and it was through that process that hackers were able to get some numbers, so that they spoof some identities, so they could try to access at the federal government level, which they really weren't successful as they were successful in other jurisdictions around the world. The second thing that surprised me was how much it was a top of mind issue for Canadians. I think people just expect it to work, and they want government to be as good as a private sector in terms of offering digitalization as opposed to digitization services, and on that front, I guess I am surprised people actually rate us that high, as that we compare favorably to the private sector, because you have to admit the private sector has the ability to do things more easily, and when they fail, they start again. Governments take a little bit of longer time to innovate. That's the reason why I'm so supportive of Minister Murray's agenda to try to make us become more like the private sector. Start a little. If you fail, well, then start again. Move in another direction quickly.
So, Shachi, what are your thoughts on this? Because we have many levels of government. So what should they all be taking away from this poll, regardless of which government it is?
Well, it is not for me to advise government. I would say that. But
what should their takeaway be?
Yeah, fair enough. I would say that Canadians are saying, first of all, they're saying that the experiences they're having are perhaps not as clunky as we may think. So I would say take that as a bit of validation for the efforts that are being made and have been made to this point. But I would also say that with the number of Canadians who are, number one, saying we're spending more and more time online, we're turning towards services online, whether they are government or non-government, and we have an expectation that our governments, even if they aren't there today, will get there in terms of both accessibility, security, and ease of use. These are the things that I think they're definitely forward communicating to levels of government just by talking about their lived experiences. And they are saying, look, if you need to work with people who have better expertise around some of these areas than you do, then do that. We're okay with that, which is something that did jump out. I always try to not be surprised by our data because it does presuppose that, you go in expecting a certain data point or a result or a finding. I always try to keep a very open mind, but certainly that does stand out to me because it does speak to a greater level of ease or acceptance around something that I think we might have all had our backs up around in terms of, well, no, government is government, and we have a higher expectation of no working with private sector or outsiders on this, because who knows what influences might be in there. In fact, what Canadians are saying is go work with the sector experts, please. Go get this done.
It's so interesting. There are many paradoxes that come out of here. And I'm sure as a pollster, as you're saying, sometimes you have to ask those surrogate questions because people don't like to admit they don't know about something. So you're a bit of looking into a crystal ball, which is why your expertise is so valuable. So what I think is interesting is when we talk about people wanting the government to spend more money on this, but people tend to be against the government spending money. And then we have the trust issues, right? So private sector is more nimble. Government and issues of security are deemed to be more trustworthy to protect you. Right. So if it generally takes longer for governments to transform or change than it does for the private sector, I think we can all agree that some people would argue it's because the public service is more risk averse than the private sector. Dave, I'm going to put this to you. In your view, how can innovation be increased within the public service without taking risks that could compromise citizens' trust?
So the word risk adverse, I think I've come to learn over my 25 years consulting in and out of different levels of government that it's risk managed, right? And public servants that I work with all state that they have an obligation to protect the taxpayer's dollar. There's a number, Minister Murray referenced this, there's governance, approval processes, stage gating. There's a machinery of government that is in place to protect the taxpayer's dollar. But now with the advancement of digital solutions, and when you look at the service experience that you receive in private sector, your data is being used across different divisions within an organization. And what does good service look like for our government interactions? It's data also being shared across departments and agencies, but there are policies in place to protect data sharing across departmental divisions. So there's also this notion of policy renewal as we look to advancement of solutions. Now, yes, I mean, I'd say, government moves in a measured approach, but over the past 11 months, we've seen government move at pace, all levels of government. Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, they deployed an online citizenship exam to deal with a significant backlog. They had 85,000 people waiting to take their test. They had a number waiting to take their oath to become citizens, and that was rapidly moved in an online format. When you look at what's happening even globally and within Canada for contact tracing, for example, we're working with a number of government entities. And in some cases, we're deploying these solutions in 3 weeks in conjunction with government departments and agencies. They want to modernize at speed to meet the demands, obviously, of the pandemic. So pandemic isn't waiting for procurement and you know, all the gates and funding approval. So governments found their agile and nimble way to get through this. So as we look to scale and modernize and transform solutions of the future, there's a number of things that can be taken, such as looking at how procurements are executed, the types of applications or platforms that are being acquired, and how can we buy those more effectively or procure them more effectively. And internal to government, Minister Murray, I mean, was bang on in terms of the people and cultural change that needs to happen. We talk about agile project delivery methods. Agile is a way of doing quick sprints, but agile is just a method. In my experience in many organizations, private and public sector, is it requires a cultural change and a mindset change within the people operating in that model.
So risk management and change management. Greg, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sort of thinking of that old line, you know, do you want something cheap? Do you want something fast? Or do you want something effective? Pick two. But I think we've shown with, as you saw with the contact tracing or the exposure notification app rather, and with CERB, we saw that we actually can do all three, but it did take that culture change that Dave was just talking about. And I think that is a kind of vision that Minister Murray has been trying to get across, is that, you know, a key pillar of this digital transformation requires that attitudinal cultural change as to how we are going to get things and move things quickly to make government as relevant as non-state actors in terms of providing digital services.
So in Minister Murray's supplementary mandate letter from the Prime Minister, it reads, this is just a part of it, lead the implementation of generational investments to update and replace outdated IT systems and modernize the way government delivers benefits and services to Canadians. Right on point here today. Nicole, what should generational investments mean in real terms in order to meet the needs and expectations of Canadians?
Well, coming from a cloud computing company, we probably wouldn't talk about generational investments being needed. I think from a cloud perspective, I mean, the advantage of cloud is that the government doesn't need to make those large capital investments. What they probably need to do is make large human capital investments. I think the talent gap, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector, is a pretty significant factor for us to think about right now. I think the pandemic has accelerated a digital shift that we knew was already happening in the Canadian economy, and it's just sort of amped up incredibly quickly. And there's a real need for digital talent, and that's both in the public and private sector, so it's not unique to public sector. One of the things, at AWS, our solution architects actually only work with customers 4 days a week. 1 day a week is fully dedicated to training. Because the technology changes quickly, and if you want to be able to leverage it, you have to stay on top of what's happening. Can you imagine if public sector employees actually were able to take that time 1 day a week to continue to learn and refine their digital skills? I think it would have an incredible impact. So I don't think that's what the government was thinking when they were thinking about generational investment, but I actually would argue that it needs to be more about a human capital investment than a capital investment.
Greg, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, we might just be disagreeing in terms of what the definition of generational change means. I think Minister Murray and the mandate letter, which was given by the Prime Minister, was really trying to say, look, the last time that we developed our systems, or we're working on a lot of systems that date back to the late 1980s, early 1990s, the world has changed. Cloud computing is a perfect example of that. So we need to move into this new 21st century. We need to have modern systems that take the best approaches, which is what Nicole was talking about. These investments, whatever we make, have to put Canadians' experiences first. So it's not just taking a paper form and turning it into a PDF and asking people to fill that out. It's really trying to change that whole approach as to how we provide services and how we can make it easier. How can we make it something more intuitive that Canadians are used to having in so many other aspects of their lives? And that's that kind of generational change that we're looking toward.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt on that note because there's something in terms of this rapid change that we're having now with this very discussion, and that is a lot of people are having bandwidth issues. So I just want to let them know that there is there's a button on the bottom right-hand screen that says click here to change bandwidth. It will lower the bandwidth on your video, but you'll still have stable audio. So if anybody's having video issues right now, please click on that button so you can continue to hear the conversations and also submit your questions.
You're on mute,
Heather, you went on mute.
Welcome to COVID.
2021.
Did you hear me to talk about the click here?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Shachi, like, what have you seen? Does any of the survey, do any of these data that you were looking at support any of this?
Sometimes what happens is we like to take the collective we and the we's on fine, professional, knowledgeable panels like this like to take what is almost an introductory foray into this subject for Canadians, which becomes, more of a finger in the wind than a really clear directive to government. And say, well, what does it all mean? Where do we go from here? And so I would put not too fine a point on the idea or the notion that Canadians in the aggregate are now all of a sudden digital modernization experts. They're not. So just, always remember to bring it back to the base level for them, which is, when I opened my app, did it work? Did it achieve or do what I needed it to do? Was it relatively painless? And did it leave me with a good impression? Oh, that was easier than I thought it would be. Or did it leave me with that was so clunky, that I wouldn't go that route again. And also the notion that people are now looking to do more and more online. And it is particularly for those really under the age of 45 and really, really under the age of, say, 25, where they are going to not only first, but only. So full confession, speeding ticket last summer, first place I go to pay the fine is online. And I phone Service BC and I'm like, why can't I pay this online? And she says, it's coming. Next time you'll be able to do it. And I'm like, no, there's not going to be a next time. But that is the example and the experience when we think about what Canadians are thinking. So let's not take the mistake of over-interpreting data sometimes. There can be opportunities to dig deeper with them. But remember, they're responding to these issues within the amalgam of everything else they're doing in a day. Again, it's not what they wake up thinking about. It's just what they need to work when they need it to work.
So that speaks to user experience. And the poll shows us that, according to your survey, 41% of respondents said the government's digital platforms are worse compared to those of other large Canadian organizations. 25% said they were about the same, and 7% said they thought they were better. I'd love to know who all these people are. Greg, does this surprise you? And in your view, in what way should government platforms be improved to be considered comparable or, just better than other digital platforms?
Well, to answer your question, the short answer is no, I'm not surprised. And actually, like you, I'd like to know who are those 25% and 7%. But this is a reason why Minister Murray, and she talked about it in her speech, why she has this third pillar of her strategy, right? It's to have an all of government approach on how we are using the same tools and same approaches, so that we no longer. She likes to talk about the four no mores. No more paper forms and faxes, no more confusing and hard to find ways to where are you going to get to benefit and services, no more having to call and then sit on hold, waiting to speak to somebody, and no more complicated logins to get the information that people should be able to just click and find out about their own accounts. So, these are the approach that she's taking, and I think that's the right approach, because that's what would finally match up or even surpass what we see happening in, again, non-governmental actors in terms of providing digital services.
Nicole, would you like to add anything to that?
We do a little bit of customer obsession at Amazon, so happy to talk a little bit about that. And it really, I think it really is a certain cultural mindset from how Amazon thinks about these things. I think it's something that you could adapt and apply in any organization. And that is, we always start with the customer and work backwards. And so at Amazon, we actually, before you sort of get a project greenlit for investment or research, you actually have to write the press release first. And the press release has to be written from the perspective of how is what you're going to be doing going to delight customers. And so how is this project that the government wants to embark on going to delight Canadians? And I think if you start with that and work backwards from that, then you can start to sort of address the blockers or the reasons why or the governance issues, but really begin with the end in mind, I guess would be another way of putting it. I was speaking with a former ADM at the Department of at the ISED, and she was tasked with creating some innovative projects in her department. And at the beginning of the project, she would have colleagues say like, oh, I can't do this because, of this rule, and we can't do that because of that rule. And so they were starting their whole process with understanding all the barriers to what they couldn't do. And she just said, that's not innovation. Like, just stop. You have to figure out where you want to go, and then we'll figure out how you get there. But don't start with the sort of walls up about what you're trying to create and build. And so that's, I think what we saw during the pandemic is government actually can move quickly when they need to. And these issues are not technology issues. The technology and the tools are there. It's really about how do we leverage them and use them. And so I think necessarily government does have to be more cautious and move slowly. There are bigger governance issues and the trust of Canadians that needs to be protected. But the technology and the tools are there. It's really about how do we sort of start with where we want to get to.
Yeah, having a vision. And you mentioned press releases. So Dave, this one's for you. The survey findings also show that most Canadians are unfamiliar with the term digital transformation. If successful digital transformation will enable Canadians to have better access to many of the critical services they rely on, how do we make it an issue that more Canadians care about so they can support greater investments? In other words, how do we let them know what they don't realize they would really help them if they knew about it?
I believe that Canadians perhaps don't know the word digitalization, but know what experience looks and feels like. And that's what we've all talked about in the last 20 minutes. And we have this notion at Accenture called liquid expectations. A liquid expectation is a great service experience that you would have had, whether it be a bank or retailer, and you go, that was excellent online service. And now that sets the bar. So your expectation seeps into other industries. And I think what we've seen with some of the report data is that those expectations of great service are also seeping into their government transactions. So I think as we look to addressing and making this important for Canadians, it comes down to, quite frankly, what level of service are they receiving? How are they able to get their service requests and interactions with government fulfilled on online channel or omni-channel for those who don't have access to online? It was somewhat ironic that bandwidth was an issue for some of the folks on this. There's a disparity of digital access, right? Rural communities, even urban settings who don't have access to tablets, computers to learn. Rural communities need access to infrastructure to be able to connect to high speed, to be able to participate in such activities. So again, I would kind of rope this up on the experience side, creating the awareness of what good and better experience can look like, and then also in the access to digital infrastructure, making sure that there's an awareness that I need to connect to be able to educate, participate in fitness, work, entertain, like all the things that we now do in this format.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things the Internet Society Canada chapter is also promoting. We have to, I mean, bandwidth should be a non-starter, right? We all need access to that. Before we move on to the audience questions, I'd just like to talk about the public-private partnership a little bit, because this is not foreign to the government. I know StatsCan has been promoting this. They've been working with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Like, there are a lot of fabulous ideas here. Today, I think we're seeing a really important iteration of that, and how everyone will be positively impacted by having this kind of partnership moving forward. So again, back to the survey, 78% of Canadians believe that the government should work with private sector technology companies to speed up progress, to get that nimbleness flexed even more than it has during the pandemic. So Greg, what does an effective partnership between the private and public sector look like from your perspective?
Well, I mean, clearly we have to work with the private sector to come up with these modern and frankly, to take a look at the things that work so well there. But also the private sector can work with government to there are some things which government has done well as, in terms of digital transformation. Let's talk about a particular example. Let's take a look at the exposure notification app. That was government led, but what did we do? We took up the offer from Shopify to help us create the coding, and they BlackBerry generously offered us, like Shopify, to test the coding to make sure it withstood the test of time, and making sure that it was sort of dummy proof in a sense, and it can do the things that it's supposed to do. That was very helpful for us to get that app out quickly and allow Canadians to become safer by downloading this exposure notification app, which, if I could put within brackets, I hope everybody who's listening to us here today has done so. It's another tool to help us to guard against the spread of the pandemic.
No, it doesn't work in BC, or it works.
We would love British Columbia as the last holdout province to come on board and join the rest of us on this exposure notification app. But I'll leave that for others to debate and to work through. But for the rest of the country, it certainly is a very useful application, and one which was done in partnership with private sector players.
Brilliant. So last question goes to Dave before we have some questions lined up. Greg, you're very popular on the question front, by the way. Dave, are there elements that each partner would be best to focus on in order to reflect and leverage their respective strengths, so it's a win-win, taking the best of both worlds?
I think you just took my answer out of the question. Play to your strengths and play to the strengths of the ecosystem around you. And these complicated solutions, I mean, what's been done with the app, what's being done across a number of departments and agencies require various strengths of team. I've been doing business transformation for 25 years. Our business is to transform. We're transformation agents. We have, cloud service providers in our ecosystem, AWS, for example. So building teams that play to strength. And then I think the element here too is, and what we've seen through COVID is the rapid procurement allowed solutions to come to the table. And there's been a traditional mechanism of how government tries to partner with private sector, and often they're looking to buy people at a certain rate. Well, the future is different. We're now buying procuring government's procuring platforms, they're procuring applications, and that's a different model. So as part of this playing to strengths is also, again, how do we transform some of the culture within the public sector to be able to work more effectively with the private sector?
Nicole, do you have anything to add to that from AWS's perspective?
I would agree with the playing to the strengths point. I mean, I think that's one of the things that Amazon and AWS are sort of always thinking about. I mean, just to use cloud, for example, one of the reasons I think it appeals to organizations is a couple of reasons. One, your technical talent can be dedicated to innovation instead of procuring racks and servers and managing data centers, which is an important skill, but one that you can easily farm outside of your organization to AWS or another cloud provider. That this is what they do day to day, and this is they innovate on it, they do it effectively, they do it efficiently, they invest more in security than any other organization does on their own, and so companies or public sector organizations that use cloud actually benefit from that scale of investment. And so the ability to kind of dedicate your resources to focus more on your mission instead of, managing data centers, I think is a much better way to use your talent resources.
And it sounds like with a trusted partner, both ways, we're stronger together, for sure. Okay, we're going to move to the audience Q&A because I'm sure there are some people out there who've been waiting to get their questions asked. Greg, we're going to start with you. This is a question from Patrick. The survey found that 86% of Canadians rank accessibility as a high priority above expanding the range of digital services available and enhancing user experience. Can you comment on what the government is already doing to make accessibility a priority in its services and how they can go further?
Well, excellent question. Thank you, Patrick, for asking that. When I think about accessibility in the context of providing digital services, I think about how we modernize the way Canadians access services online, while at the same time leaving no one behind. We have to make sure, everyone now has smartphones, but how about those who can't afford it? I shouldn't say everyone. Everyone within quotation marks has smartphones. But what about those who can't afford it, or those who lack access to high-speed internet, as we saw even with some of our participants today who are having some trouble with bandwidth in accessing the video? If digital government is about designing and delivering services that are secure, reliable, and easy to use, we gotta make sure that they're for everyone, regardless of age, income, or where they live, and digital literacy. The best thing that we can do is to make sure that there are a lot of self-serve services so that people can access their accounts, leaving open then for those who don't have, who are not able to access our services, leaving that more people available to help them and to guide them through by telephone or by or by letter or in-person meetings. By giving more accessibility of services to people who have the tools to access it, it liberates us to provide more personalized service for those who require it because they don't have the tools at hand.
I would add it's really interesting. I think people need to be reminded that having accessibility is not just for people who need it. There are these additional benefits that we see as society. For instance, as a former broadcaster, the audio to text became something we called mute value. So when you're in the hair salon or in the airport and that comes up, everybody benefits from that. So
we all use it.
Yeah, so it's actually narrow. The intentions may be more narrowly defined, but the outcomes have a much broader impact, which is why we need to always focus on these things. It's fantastic.
Exactly
Okay,
right.
I have two more questions.
Can I just add very quickly? I know you want to get to more questions. It's also absolutely critical when we think about demographic trends. When we think about aging trends in this country and what that does around visual issues with eyesight, seeing, hearing, we are about to go driving at top speed off of a demographic cliff in terms of our aging population. And we do need to be mindful about how that is baked into the access question, because people don't think of themselves as old or having barriers, but they're coming and they will be real.
Yeah, and I just want to defend my generation. I look at a lot of young people who are suffering from fry eye, because of all the time they spend looking at a monitor. So don't think it's going to take 40 years for you to need these visual assistance devices. You want to be able to have that user-friendly experience, whether or not you have your glasses on hand. So I think we can all look at that and see that there's definitely a need coming up. We're short on time. I think there's probably, maybe we just do a quick 30 seconds each for a general question. What have we learned from the pandemic? This is kind of the elephant in the room, right? This is the thing that has kind of expedited all of this and put it top of mind. What have we learned from the pandemic, and how, this is from Gloria, by the way, and how do we use those learnings to continue this accelerated pace and not become complacent and slow down? How do we guard against that? So we got to keep the momentum going. Let's start with you, Shachi, and just go around. If you could just give 30 seconds on that.
I would just say that the pandemic, I can do it in less than 30 seconds, has really just been such a catalyzing influence and force. So there's two factors here. It has had the impact of speeding up things that we were experimenting with on the cusp of, and within a 12-month period, they've become absolutely normalized. But to the second part of that question, what is the snap back value once the elastic starts, once this is over? To what extent are our societies going to want to keep some of the things that they got used to during the pandemic? And what are the things they want to go back to? That could be working from home, that could be any number of things. So I think it's about sussing out both the long-term and the short-term aspects of this, and then making those decisions and understanding those trends from there. Not all of this is going to continue to be forever.
Dave.
If you're processing paper, rethink it. If your only channel is in person, rethink it. And if you're concerned at speed of implementation, address your internal approach and culture. Like, that's what we've learned is out of necessity. Those things, those three items out of necessity has sustained the economy the last 10 months. If we're going to propel and grow it, we need to really look at these elements in the future to truly transform service.
Nicole.
Just because I think I need to come up with something different, I think we've in some ways learned to fail fast. So you want to fail very quickly so that you can pivot and find how you can be successful. So I would say we've learned to fail more quickly, which is important.
And Greg, last word to you.
I wish it came to me before you went to Nicole. She took part of my line. I think there are two things which we learned. A, we can move quickly, and that's really important. It changes the whole attitude. And secondly, we've also learned the value of failing fast. Not everything that we rolled out was perfect in the pandemic, but we adjusted quickly because we knew that time was of the essence. So I think those two elements are really paradigm breaking, and will serve government well in the years to come.
Thank you very much, Greg. Well, that's all the time we have for today. It was a really enlightening discussion. I want to thank everyone for their expertise, insights, and just, kind of the authenticity of approaching this and how we're all in it together. So thank you again to our panelists, MP Greg Fergus, Shachi Curl with Angus Reid, Nicole Foster, AWS, and Dave Telka, and the Honourable Joyce Murray for establishing, and the Honourable Joyce Murray for establishing the framework for today's discussion based on the survey results. We're also grateful to the Internet Society Canada chapter, Angus Reid Institute, and AWS for bringing this critical and timely issue to the forefront for the benefit of all Canadians, because that's what it's all about, right? So what we're here for. So thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us. We hope you learned some key takeaways and are now armed with actionable information to keep this momentum going. Remember to go to angusreid.org, check out the survey, digital transformation, use government services as much as you can. It will make life easier. And on that, I'd like to say have a great afternoon, stay healthy, and we hope to have this discussion another time. Thanks.
Thank you.